The big names you know, the other guys you've never heard of. Until now. This is Around the Nest. Jay talking around the Blue Jays minor league system.
Around the Nest rolls on. Let's bring in Jim Tarabocchia, the voice of the Dunedin Blue Jays. Jim, first, how have you spent your time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've been staying busy, working on some different projects. One of them being my own podcast as well. And gosh, that's a lot of work. And I commend you certainly for doing a podcast every week and doing it in season. And how busy that is for you. And I know how busy it is now. And I do all the artwork and producing and recording. So that's been something that's taken up my time and sort of trying to, where we stand now, recording this on Thursday, October 22nd, trying to get myself back into the mode of the season 2021 and making believe that it's a regular off season. And, look, it's not a regular off season for really anybody. It's not been a normal year for anybody across the country, across the world landscape. But for me personally, just trying to stay in that mode and that routine, trying to get back to some normalcy and get ready for the 2021 season the way that I have prepared in the past. And hopefully things to come to fruition. And we cross our fingers and go forward. So that's really kind of how I've been occupying my time, other than, still doing my normal stuff, my normal boring life, food shopping and fantasy football, training. And luckily I'm in a state in Florida that did open up a little bit earlier than other states. So I got a chance to go back to the gym and go train and not really miss much of a beat. So I'm lucky in that retrospect.
In terms of preparing for the 2021 baseball season, what does that entail for you?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of looking at all the templates that we've been working on in the last year and seeing where we can improve, even if it's the smallest little things. Like I discovered something today that I said to myself, you've been doing this for so long and you've graze right over that part. So just looking at some templates and seeing where they can improve, starting our 2021 Dunedin Blue Jays media guide. I finished last year's 2020. Unfortunately, there was no season, but by the time it rolled around, the season was called, I was finished it. So when was the season called? I guess the minor league season, June. So I finished it in early May, and I kind of took April, in a way, I kind of took April off a little bit from doing that, because it is a lot of work. It's 150 pages and yeah, you're shaking your head because you know exactly what I'm talking about. But after that, I just said, screw it, I'm just going to finish it. So I went on to finish it. So I'm starting that and starting that in about, I don't know, around Thanksgiving time, maybe like a week after. So, it just making sure that everything is where it needs to be, with all of the templates and all of the parts of that go into my job for the season.
With regard to looking ahead to 2021, there was a question that came in from Minor Leaguer about how each of us sees the 2021 minor league baseball landscape. It's a very wide-ranging question. That's a very big question. How do you see minor league baseball changing going into next year?
Well, I miss those questions from Minor Leaguer every Friday. I appreciate that question. Gosh, with the contraction of these minor league teams and Major League Baseball having more of a footprint in the minors, I don't know. And I think that's even more reason, going back to your last question, as to why, for me, I needed some normalcy and why I'm getting ready for the 2021 season. And maybe I'm a little bit early in doing that, but I just need that normalcy. And I know I'm lucky enough that our team, our Advanced A team here in Dunedin, like Lansing, not one of the teams that are being contracted and are being lost to what's happening. So certainly there's going to be a couple of changes, I think, in the Florida State League going forward with some teams being contracted out. But gosh, I really don't know. Do I think it will become more efficient? in terms of player development. I do, especially now. I mean, you heard our team president, Mark Shapiro. I'm sure you did. Maybe audience members did not. But he said yesterday to the media that we're going to have one of the best, I'm paraphrasing here, but we're going to have one of the best training complexes in all the land, in all of Major League Baseball. And he's right. I mean, I've gotten a chance to sort of see what's going on, how it's being built over there. And it is really, really tremendous. And they put in so much money. The county did, the team did, and getting that right. So, and with the way training complexes are, I've noticed with, even with Houston and with Washington, in Palm Beach, those two sharing a complex, and in Arizona with Cleveland and the Mariners as well in Arizona. Doing all my research, I've seen that some of these complexes, if you would have said 30, 40 years ago, that they would look like this, or they would run so efficiently, I think players back then would have been like, well, could we go into a time machine, and could we fast forward to 2019, 2020? Because the complexes are unbelievable. So I think it will be a little bit, the player development side will be a little bit more tighter, especially at the lower levels. So I think minor league baseball will change in that retrospect. I think it'll be a lot more in-house and a lot more hands-on with how teams approach working with those younger guys that are fresh out of high school, fresh out of college, which, by the way, and I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I've always said, I don't want anybody to lose a team. I don't want anybody to lose their job. But I've always said that at the lower levels of the minor leagues, below where you are, even below short season too, because, I mean, Class A is from what I've heard from you and I've heard from players coming to Advanced A, it is very competitive. But below that, I got to tell you, it's a little, at times, just repetitive. And I think when you just send guys out and you get drafted, and then you say, okay, you spend a week or whatever, you sign a week at the complex, and you go out to an affiliate, I don't really see how that is helping the player get better. I especially with the draft and being that, you're drafted in June, and then you have until early September to play a game, unless you're in short season or play games. I mean, it's not efficient to me. So I think take that time to get players used to it. Even if you're coming from college, your body gets shocked of professional baseball, and mentally you get a little bit shocked as well, because now this is it. This is your job. This isn't college anymore where you have other activities. This isn't high school where you have a million things going on as well. So I think you take that time from June to September to get them ready to send them out and put them on a roster, whether it be short season or Class A next year, to where I think it'll speed up their development a little bit more. So I think I like the idea of more complex work at the low levels of minor league baseball. And I think that's where things will really change. And I think they'll continue to evolve and get better.
Let me ask you about an individual player
Sure.
who developed. Player who was in Dunedin in 2019 and in the majors this year. Alejandro Kirk skipped over AA and AAA.
Mm-hmm.
You got to see him the majority of 2019.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you that suddenly here he is as a bright spot for the Jays?
It's that 2020 cliche. Nothing surprises me now, right? Everybody says it. Everybody from politicians I see on TV to broadcasters to media relations people to, baseball operations folks. Nothing surprises you with 2020. I always knew the talent was there, certainly, but I look across other organizations and see, and Alejandro as well as I do, maybe even more. With Alejandro, he was always mentally, I don't want to say mentally tough, but there's something different about him. Nothing bothered him, ever. I mean, he can go 0 for 4 and you wouldn't even know it. And you hear that so many times with players, quarterbacks in the NFL and especially with baseball players. You used to hear with Peyton Manning, or Tom Brady, the guy could have a horrible game, next week comes out and throws 4 touchdowns. I mean, he did horrible against New Orleans and this year, and then he comes out the next week and does great. I mean, you see it so many times with mentally tough athletes, and Alejandro's one of those guys. I mean, he can go 0 for 4 and you wouldn't know it. So I knew mentally it was all there, and I knew the talent was there. I think the question I had, where's he actually end up playing? And I think he certainly surprised some people, me being one of them, of how well he did at the catcher position, because I think there was still some developing there. I think the tools were there, but I think there was still some small developments that had to be made in terms of blocking, but that comes with experience. And you look at some players that across baseball that went into other organizations, Mickey Moniak being one, that were in other organizations that were sort of thrust into these roles of being at the big league level and didn't do too well. That's not a knock on Mickey. I think he still has some talent, but with Alejandro, that wasn't the case. And I think it kind of separated him from where he is and his development, where he needs to get to. And I think it helped somebody like him. So I wasn't too surprised. Was I a little surprised by as much success as he had behind the plate, catching, or defensively, I should say? A little bit. Offensively, though, not really. It's funny that my podcast partner, we talked about Alejandro. We talked about his walkout song, and we talked to everything from his walkout song to his shape, to his body physically, to his defensive prowess, to offensively. His defensive prowess, how he was this year, obviously, and to his offensive game, and everything about his offensive game checks out. But what it comes down to is defensively, how's this guy going to do, and what position is there for him at the major league level? And I think there are some real questions answered. Now, do I think he can play at the major league level next year? I think he proved that this year. But, that's a long way off, and we have to see where he will be. The people who make the decisions, I'm saying we, like I'm part of that. I think that that people who make those decisions have to be able to evaluate him and see how far off he is defensively, see how far off he is offensively. Was it just a flash in the pan type thing? Will he be figured out offensively? How will he make adjustments? He didn't have to make too many adjustments, in my opinion, at the major league level this year because he was so good offensively. Will he be able to make those adjustments? He really hasn't failed much at any level, which, hey, it's just great at the minor league side. But you're going to run into that at the major league level, and how quickly you can make adjustments are the real separators to staying there and being kind of shuttled next year between AAA, AA, AAA, and the major league level.
Finally, you mentioned your podcast.
Yes.
Tell me more about your podcast.
It's I said a few years ago that I based it off the amount of work. Some of it I based off the amount of work that you do. And I said, it's just, I'm too busy. It's too much work. I don't think I'm going to ever do a podcast. And besides, I don't know what I'd actually talk about. I'm quite frankly not that interesting. And so I said, you know what? Let's try it. Let's just try. And I found a passion of mine that I said, okay, I have the equipment, I have the computer, I have the passion for this one topic, 2 topics. I had 2 podcasts. Unfortunately, my other podcast partner had to step away, a friend of mine. But I said, I'm going to, and I have a connection here, a few connections. So I said, okay, I'm going to try it. So I reached out to a friend of mine. His name is Jake Epstein. He currently works in the Brewers organization. He's a special assignment scout on the offensive side of things. And so when the Brewers draft hitters, that it's filtered through him. A lot of it's filtered through him, which is good. And he was my former hitting instructor back in the day. So I reached out, and him and I have been kind of speaking over the years and seeing how we're doing. And his dad is Mike Epstein. I don't know if you know Mike Epstein, but he played with the Athletics predominantly. And Ted Williams wrote him a letter of recommendation as a hitting instructor. He followed Ted Williams step by step with on the offensive side of things. And Jake, and he passed that along to his son. And now, again, Epstein Online Hitting Academy has become a destination for a lot of hitters, for amateur, for pro guys, college guys. And he's now, again, like I mentioned, he's with the Brewers as well. But his main thing is his academy, and he does some online certification stuff as well. So we got in touch, and I because I haven't talked to him at that point in about a year and a half, and I said, hey, what would you think about this? And I didn't think he would be really open to it because, again, podcasting world's kind of squirrely, and people don't really know what it's all about. And he was all for it. He was like, let's do it. And I said, okay, great. And really the first episode, outside of some of the, on my end, the technical gaffes, we hit it right off. The chemistry, it's different, as you know. It's really different on air and off air. You know that. I mean, you have great chemistry with people off air, but you don't have it on air, which for some weird reason I still haven't figured that out. But doing the podcast, him and I, we had great chemistry off air, and we had it, so on air, recording on air, so to speak, and we really hit it off and on the podcast, and it's worked out well. We're this week we're recording episode number 20. Geez, I forget. I have it on my prep sheet, but we're recording episode. I think it's episode 28, and we're talking about the career of Sandy Alomar, which is great. But we usually just talk about hitting, different topics pertaining to hitting, and that's my biggest passion, is hitting, and it's always been a love of mine. And getting to sit down with him for an hour every week and talk hitting is not just a learning experience, but it really is kind of a step away just from the real world and enter into my own little world in my head, and broadcast that for an hour. So that's the Lab. I'm going to quick, if you don't mind, quick cheap plug. It's the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. New episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Apple, Google, Spotify, Pandora. We're on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, SoundCloud. We have our own YouTube page, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast YouTube page, clips with artwork and full episodes, archived episodes as well. And for those who listen loyally to Around the Nest, they can email me, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com, with any questions that they may have for Jake. But I do encourage people to check it out. The listening numbers, they weren't as good on the pitching side, unfortunately, for the pitching podcast, but for the hitting side, the hitting podcast, the numbers have well exceeded what I thought they would be, and I'm pretty proud of it. And I've enjoyed it so much, I may start one other podcast. That's kind of a different project, but that's kind of in the works, and I'm going to try to get that going.
And this is great. When you say Sandy Alomar, do you mean Sandy Alomar the first, or do you mean Sandy Alomar Jr., the catcher?
The catcher. His birthday is on Monday. October, what's that going to be? 3, 4, 5, October 26th, I think, is Monday. Whatever date Monday is, that's his birthday. And we're going to kind of break away from the topic of just talking about an element of hitting, and we're going to talk about his career on the offensive side, defensively, the impact he had in baseball, because Jake's father, Mike, played against Sandy, so we're going to kind of discuss that and break away from the hitting side and talk about Sandy Alomar, the catcher.
This is
His
great.
birthday. And actually, in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to talk about it's the NFL. I don't know if you know this. You probably do. But the anniversary of the Cubs World Series win from 2016 is coming up in, it might be, if you don't mind, I'm going to check my phone here. It's coming up. If you remember a couple of years ago against Cleveland, it was in beginning of November. I think it was, a few days before the election in 2016, and it's coming up. So November 4th. Okay, so it's it was November, I think it was November, whatever. Anyway, whatever it was, if it's November 4th, I think it was November 4th, 2016. Well, November 4th, day after Election Day this year in 2020, we're going to be kind of looking back at Game 7, breaking that down in a couple of weeks as well, just from kind of the offensive side and breaking down that Game 7, where the Cubs won. So,
Jim, I love it. So big thanks to you for taking the time. Jim Tarabocchia, the voice of the Dunedin Blue Jays, here's to your continued success.
Oh, you too, man. And I look forward to, we should do more Around the Nests throughout the winter. I think that'd be good. I'd enjoy that.